Chapter 1. The Invitation. The envelope was black, thick, almost velvet to the touch. It arrived without warning, a solitary, ominous object in the pristine white of the mailbox. No return address, no sender's name, merely the house number scrawled in a looping, unfamiliar script. Inside, a single sheet of paper, its edges feathered as if touched by unseen fingers. The invitation was written in an elegant, archaic font, the ink a deep crimson that seemed to bleed into the paper. A chill crept over her as she read. It was not the words themselves, though they were peculiar enough. A summons to a gathering, a reunion of sorts, in a house she had never known. It was the sensation, a cold tendril wrapping around her heart, a premonition of something sinister lurking just beyond the veil of normalcy. The address was a desolate stretch of countryside, a place lost in time. A house, the invitation promised, full of echoes and secrets, a place where the past and present intertwine. With each word, a deeper unease settled within her. She knew she should discard the invitation, burn it perhaps, and forget the unsettling encounter. But a compulsion, dark and alluring, drew her in. Days turned into a blur as she prepared. A suitcase filled with essentials, a backpack for the unknown. Her reflection in the mirror was a stranger's, eyes shadowed with a fear she couldn't quite name. The house at the end of the winding dirt road was a looming specter, a gothic silhouette against the twilight sky. It was older than it should be, its architecture a haunting blend of Victorian and something more primitive. Windows, like empty eyes, stared back at her, promising secrets and shadows. A tremor ran through her. This was not a reunion. It was a descent. Chapter 2. The Old House. The house was a behemoth, a gothic monstrosity that seemed to have risen from the earth itself. Its gray stone exterior was scarred with time. A patchwork of lichen and creeping ivy, towering gargoyles, grotesque and menacing, guarded the entrance, their stone eyes seeming to follow her every movement. Inside, a heavy, oppressive silence reigned. The grand foyer was a cavernous space, its high ceiling lost in shadow. Dust motes danced in the dim light filtering through stained glass windows, each pane depicting a haunting scene of biblical torment. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a mixture of old wood and something more sinister, a metallic tang that hinted at secrets buried deep within the house's heart. As she explored, the house seemed to grow, to stretch and shift, defying the laws of space and time. Rooms opened into unexpected corridors, and doors appeared where there had been none before. Shadows writhed and danced, taking on grotesque forms in the flickering candlelight. The floorboards groaned and creaked, as if the house itself were alive, breathing a sinister rhythm. A chill crept down her spine, a cold dread that seeped into her bones. She was alone, utterly and completely alone. The house was a labyrinth of fear, a place where sanity was a fragile thread. With each step deeper into its heart, she felt herself unraveling, becoming a part of the darkness that seemed to seep from every corner. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Corner. Night descended upon the house like a tangible entity, its presence as palpable as the cold stone beneath her feet. The wind howled through the ancient timbers, a mournful dirge that seemed to seep into her bones. Shadows stretched and writhed in the dim candlelight, taking on grotesque and menacing forms. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she moved through the house, each creak and groan of the old building a fresh assault on her senses. The shadows seemed to grow darker, more substantial with each passing moment. They lurked in the corners of rooms, in the shadowed recesses beneath the grand staircase, and in the flickering reflections of the antique mirrors. A sense of being watched permeated the air, a cold dread that clung to her like a shroud. She could feel their eyes upon her, countless pairs of unseen eyes, burning into her soul. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord, shifting and reforming into grotesque shapes, a macabre ballet of darkness. Fear, cold and insidious, gripped her heart. The house was alive, a malevolent entity feeding on her terror. She was trapped, a prisoner in a world of shadows, a solitary soul lost in a labyrinth of dread. Chapter 4. The Whispers. The whispers began softly, a mere rustle in the wind. A distant echo carried on the currents of the old house. But as the night deepened, they grew louder, more insistent, until they filled the air with a cacophony of unseen voices. They were whispers of loss, of despair, of unspeakable horrors. They were the cries of the damned, echoing through the corridors of time. They spoke of secrets buried deep within the house's heart, of sacrifices made and blood spilled. They spoke of a darkness that had seeped into the foundations, a malevolent force that fed on fear. The whispers were a constant companion, a chilling presence that followed her through the labyrinthine halls. They mocked her fear, egged on her despair. They promised her pain, suffering, and a fate worse than death. With each passing hour, the whispers grew stronger, their words more menacing. She was losing her grip on reality, slipping into a chasm of madness, lured deeper and deeper into the heart of darkness. Chapter 5. The Uninvited Guest. A shadow moved in the periphery of her vision, a fleeting flicker in the dim candlelight. It was a shape, amorphous and indistinct, a malevolent presence that seemed to seep from the very walls of the house. Her heart pounded in her ears, a frantic drumbeat against the growing silence. She turned slowly, her breath held, her gaze fixed on the darkness. A figure emerged, a grotesque silhouette against the gloom. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that seemed to stretch and contort. Its face was a mask of shadow, devoid of features, save for two burning red eyes that pierced the darkness. A cold dread washed over her, a paralyzing terror that chilled her to the bone. The creature moved with a silent grace, its steps muffled by the thick carpet. It approached her slowly, inexorably, its presence a suffocating weight. She backed away, her movements clumsy and desperate. The creature's eyes never left her, a cold, predatory gleam in their depths. A scream built in her throat, but no sound escaped her lips. She was frozen, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The creature was upon her, its shadow looming over her, swallowing her whole. Chapter 6. The ritual begins. Consciousness returned in jolts, a painful reawakening to a world of suffocating darkness. Her body ached, every muscle protesting the unfamiliar position. A cold, clammy sensation enveloped her, a chilling embrace that seeped into her bones. She tried to move, but her limbs were heavy, unresponsive. Fear, a cold, icy hand, gripped her heart. A low hum filled the air, a rhythmic pulsation that vibrated through her body. It was a sound ancient and otherworldly, a haunting melody that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth. As her senses sharpened, she became aware of other sounds, soft whispers and guttural moans, a chorus of unseen voices. A faint light appeared, a sliver of illumination cutting through the darkness. It grew, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Figures emerged from the gloom, their shapes distorted and elongated by the flickering light. They were cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden, their eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. A circle of candles illuminated a pentagram etched into the floor, its glow casting an eerie light on the ritualistic paraphernalia scattered around. A sense of impending doom washed over her, a cold dread that chilled her to the bone. She was a prisoner, a sacrificial lamb destined for a fate beyond comprehension. The ritual was about to begin. Chapter 7. the sacrifice. The chanting began, a low, hypnotic rhythm that seemed to seep into her soul. The figures moved in a choreographed dance, their bodies swaying to the unseen melody. The air grew thick with the scent of incense, a cloying sweetness that mingled with the metallic tang of fear. Her body was lifted, carried effortlessly by unseen hands. She struggled, but her efforts were futile. She was placed upon the altar, a cold stone slab that vibrated with an ancient energy. The chanting grew louder, more insistent, a cacophony of voices that filled the air with a sense of impending doom. A knife, glinting in the candlelight, appeared in the outstretched hand of one of the figures. It was long and slender, its blade shimmering with an unnatural light. Fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped her heart. This was the end, the final chapter in a terrifying ordeal. The knife descended, the blade glinting in her eyes. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable pain. But the blow never came. Instead, a blinding light erupted, filling the room with a celestial radiance. The chanting ceased abruptly, replaced by a chorus of terrified screams. The figures scattered, their shadows retreating into the darkness. The light enveloped her, warm and comforting. A sense of peace washed over her, a calm that defied the chaos around her. As the light began to fade, she felt a gentle tugging sensation, as if she were being drawn upward. With a final surge of energy, she was lifted from the altar and carried away from the darkness. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. She awoke in a sterile, white room. The harsh fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness of the ritual chamber. Her body ached with a dull, persistent pain, a constant reminder of the ordeal she had endured. A cold sweat broke out as memories of the night flooded her mind. The chanting, the knife, the blinding light. Fear, a cold, insidious companion, crept back into her heart. She was alone, utterly and completely isolated. The world outside the sterile white walls was a terrifying unknown, a place filled with shadows and secrets. The house, the ritual, the creatures of the night. They were real, tangible threats. Panic began to rise, a tidal wave of terror that threatened to consume her. She was a survivor, but the scars ran deeper than skin. The horrors she had witnessed had shattered her sense of reality, leaving her adrift in a sea of doubt. The world she once knew was gone, replaced by a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. A sob escaped her lips, a sound born of despair and loneliness. She was broken, a fragile vessel shattered by the storm. The road to recovery would be long and arduous, filled with shadows and uncertainties. But she was alive, a flicker of hope in the darkness. And with that flicker, a spark of defiance ignited within her. She would not be a victim. She would survive. Chapter 9. The Abyss. The darkness was a consuming entity, a void that stretched infinitely in all directions. She was falling, or perhaps rising, it was impossible to tell. Time had lost its meaning, a meaningless concept in this realm of nothingness. Fear, a constant companion, had transformed into a cold, indifferent observer, a silent witness to her descent into the abyss. Memories surfaced, fragmented and distorted, like shattered pieces of a broken mirror. The house, the ritual, the creatures of the night. They were all part of a larger tapestry, a cosmic horror beyond comprehension. She was a pawn in a game of unimaginable stakes, a sacrifice to forces ancient and malevolent. Despair crept in, a venomous snake that coiled around her heart. There was no escape, no redemption. This was the end, a final oblivion from which there would be no return. Yet, in the depths of her despair, a flicker of defiance remained, a tiny spark of resistance against the encroaching darkness. She reached out, grasping for something, anything to cling to. In the void, she found nothing but emptiness. And yet, in that emptiness, a strange sense of peace began to emerge. It was a peace born of acceptance, a surrender to the inevitable. Perhaps, in this final moment, she would find the answer she sought, the truth hidden in the heart of the abyss. Chapter 10. A glimpse of light. A pinprick of light appeared in the darkness, a tiny spark in the vast expanse of nothingness. It grew, expanding into a blinding radiance that filled the void. She shielded her eyes, but the light penetrated her defenses, washing over her with a sense of warmth and comfort. The darkness retreated, replaced by a breathtaking panorama. A celestial landscape unfolded before her, a realm of ethereal beauty beyond human comprehension. Floating islands of light dotted the horizon, their surfaces shimmering with iridescent colors. A gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of exotic flowers, filling the air with a sense of peace and tranquility. She was floating, weightless and free, surrounded by a chorus of angelic voices. The fear, the despair, the pain, they were all gone, replaced by a sense of wonder and awe. This was a place of healing, a sanctuary from the horrors of the world she had left behind. A figure emerged from the mist, a being of pure light, its form indistinct yet undeniably benevolent. It approached her slowly, its presence a soothing balm to her troubled soul. A sense of understanding passed between them, a silent communication that transcended words. She was safe, protected, loved. As the figure reached out to her, a surge of energy coursed through her body. She felt a connection to something greater than herself, a part of a cosmic tapestry that extended far beyond the boundaries of human comprehension. With a sense of peace and purpose, she allowed herself to be enveloped by the light. Chapter 11. The confrontation. She stood on the precipice of reality, a bridge between the ethereal realm and the mortal world. The landscape before her was familiar yet transformed, the house a haunting silhouette against a sky ablaze with unnatural colors. A sense of purpose, a fierce determination, ignited within her. It was time to confront the darkness, to break the chains that bound her to the past. The house loomed larger as she approached, its sinister facade unchanged. With each step, her resolve grew stronger. She entered the familiar foyer, the air thick with the same oppressive silence. The house seemed to resist her presence, the shadows deepening, the whispers growing louder. A confrontation was inevitable, she called out, her voice echoing through the empty halls. A response came, not in words but in a surge of darkness. The shadows coalesced, forming the grotesque shapes she had come to dread. The creatures of the night emerged from the shadows, their eyes burning with malevolent intent. Fear was a familiar companion, but it no longer held dominion over her. She faced her adversaries with a courage born of desperation. The battle that ensued was not of flesh and blood, but of spirit and will. With each vanquished shadow, her strength grew, her resolve hardened. The final confrontation was with the entity at the heart of the darkness, a formless mass of pure evil. It was a battle for the soul of the house, a struggle between light and darkness. As the two forces clashed, the house trembled, its foundations shaking. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was the end. Chapter 12. The Revelation. The battle raged, a tempest of light and shadow. The house groaned and creaked, its ancient timbers straining under the immense pressure. The entity, a malevolent force of pure evil, fought with a desperation born of millennia of imprisonment. Its attacks were relentless, but she endured, her spirit unbroken. In a moment of clarity, she realized the truth. The house was not merely a haunted dwelling. It was a prison, a containment vessel for an ancient evil. The rituals, the sacrifices, they were all part of a desperate attempt to keep the darkness at bay. And now, with the entity freed from its confines, the world was in peril. A surge of power coursed through her, a gift from the ethereal realm. She channeled her energy, focusing it into a blinding light. The entity recoiled, its form flickering and wavering. With a final, desperate effort, she unleashed the full force of her power, a blinding explosion of light that consumed the darkness. The house shook violently, then collapsed in a cloud of dust. When the dust settled, nothing remained but a vacant lot, a void where the house once stood. The evil was vanquished, the threat neutralized. A sense of peace washed over her, a profound calm that filled her soul. She had faced her fears, conquered her demons, and emerged victorious. The ordeal had transformed her, forged her into something stronger, more resilient. As the first rays of dawn touched her face, she realized that the nightmare was over. A new day was dawning, a day filled with hope and promise. Chapter 13. The Reckoning. The world was different now, irrevocably changed. The echoes of the horror she had endured lingered, a persistent whisper in the back of her mind. Yet, there was a strength within her, a resilience forged in the crucible of darkness. She was a survivor, a beacon of hope in a world filled with shadows. The authorities were baffled by the disappearance of the house. There were no records, no trace of its existence. It was as if it had never been there, a ghost in the annals of time. The local people whispered of strange occurrences, of shadows and whispers, but no one dared to speak of the horrors she had witnessed. With each passing day, the memories faded, softened by the passage of time. The house became a distant echo, a haunting specter in the realm of dreams. But the lessons learned, the courage forged, remained. She carried the scars, both visible and invisible, as a testament to her survival. Life began to rebuild itself around her. Slowly, tentatively, she emerged from the shadows, facing the world with a newfound determination. The past was a chapter closed, but the story was far from over. There were still pages to be written, adventures to be had, and a future to be embraced. With every step forward, she left the darkness behind, walking towards the light. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles, but she was ready, prepared to face whatever came her way. For she knew, deep within her soul, that she was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a conqueror of darkness. Chapter 14. The Escape. The morning sun painted the world in hues of gold and pink, casting long shadows that danced with the remnants of the night. She stood at the edge of the vacant lot, the place where the house once stood, a silent sentinel guarding the secrets of the past. A sense of closure washed over her, a final farewell to the horrors that had haunted her. With a deep breath, she turned and walked away, leaving the darkness behind. The world was new, filled with possibilities. The road ahead was unknown, but she was ready to embrace the journey. There was a lightness in her step, a freedom she had not felt in a long time. The city stretched before her, a bustling metropolis filled with life and energy. It was a stark contrast to the desolate countryside where the house had stood. But even here, amidst the towering buildings and the relentless pace of modern life, she found a sense of belonging. She found a small apartment, a modest space that offered a sanctuary from the world. It was filled with sunlight, a stark contrast to the shadows of the past. Slowly, she began to rebuild her life, piece by piece. She found a job, made friends, and discovered new passions. The process was slow and arduous, but with each step, she felt a sense of accomplishment. The darkness was receding, replaced by the warmth of human connection. She was learning to live again, to find joy in the simple things. The escape was underway, and with every passing day, she was getting closer to freedom. Chapter 15. Dawn of a New Day. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting dancing shadows on the walls. A new day was dawning, filled with promise and potential. The city awakened with a hum of activity, a symphony of life that filled her heart with a sense of belonging. She stood on her balcony, a cup of coffee warming her hands. The world stretched out before her, a canvas of endless possibilities. The shadows of the past had faded, replaced by the vibrant colors of the present. She was no longer a prisoner of fear, but a free spirit, soaring on the wings of hope. The scars remained, but they were badges of courage, reminders of the strength she had discovered within herself. The house, the ritual, the darkness, they were chapters in a story, a harrowing tale of survival. But the story was far from over. This was a new beginning, a chance to write a different ending. With a deep breath, she stepped into the day, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The world was vast and full of wonder, and she was determined to explore every corner of it. The future was uncertain, but she embraced it with open arms, eager to see what adventures awaited. As she walked down the street, the sunlight on her face, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The darkness was vanquished, replaced by a radiant light. She was alive, thriving, and filled with a sense of purpose. The dawn of a new day had arrived, and she was ready to embrace it.